Well, guys, it's Saturday again, so that means we are due for another episode of Your Reader Questions on our podcast here. Daryl in the headquarters here doing some site maintenance, trying to work on getting a new site built and designed here. Taking some time, answer some of the questions we got this week from you guys. Gonna start off with one, and I really didn't expect my little rant and diatribe about Spotify to end up being so polarizing for people. I think some people see my point on the whole thing, and some people really don't. So I have a question here from Cindy, who asks, why I have such a big problem with Spotify. Isn't it better for the artist to get something rather than nothing if people download their music illegally? Okay, and that's a fair question. And yes, it is better for them to get something rather than nothing. However, let's turn this around. If you were going to get a job, and this is your profession, this is what you're doing for your to earn your living, and you come in for your first day, and your boss tells you, by the way, you make $1 an hour. Well, that doesn't really work so well. So yes, while it's better for these artists to get a couple bucks rather than nothing, these are people who are trying to be working musicians, people who want to do this for a living, people who are working hard to put out albums, to write songs, to get it all recorded, and a lot of times they're paying out of pocket to get this done. So for them to get their music, and obviously they put their music on Spotify, but I just think that they don't really understand that they're not really going to get enough back to make it worth it. And in a lot of cases, the labels own the rights, the labels put it on the streaming services, and by the time it's all said and done, when everyone gets their cut, the band really doesn't see nearly as much as they deserve. Which is, again, if you use Spotify, I guess I can't complain. At least the artists are getting something, but it needs to be more. And, the only way for them to get more, buy their album on Bandcamp if they're on there, get it from the band at a show. Try and give the band the best opportunity to make as much money as possible on the recording. Because if you're listening to it consistently, then, they deserve to get at least a couple dollars of your money. And especially when the bands do the, name your price feature on Bandcamp, don't just download it for free. Give them a couple bucks at least, because that all that money is going directly to the band. Bandcamp only takes 10%. So that's really it. So yes, I understand your point, Cindy, but like I said, the bands deserve more than they're getting. And, for the gentleman from Cracker to get his royalty check for 1 million plays on Pandora and it's $16.28, that's not acceptable. Hopefully this will be one of the last times I end up talking about Spotify, but I thought that was a question worth answering. Angelo wants to know what the ratings actually mean. How do you determine what score an album gets, and why are so many of them so high? Okay, well, that's a two-part question. I'll answer the second part first. The reason most of the ratings are higher, and I think I've gone over this once before, is that it's, we are metal fans. We want to listen to metal. We want to listen to music that we like, though. So you've noticed, there aren't that many bad reviews that go on the site, and a lot of the bad or mediocre reviews that end up on the site are albums usually that we had high hopes for that just didn't pan out. But there's been definitely a downswing in lackluster reviews. And on the flip side of that leaves good reviews. I can only really, I want to point out that reviews are not relative. It's not compared to anything else. It's not like, okay, well, if this album is a 9 and this other album is in the same genre and it's better, then it's a 9.5 and a 10. It's all self-contained within the album. So, if I give something a 10, that means the album is basically flawless. That it's one that will make it into your collection, you'll listen to all the time, and you have no problems with it. 9.5 usually is minor details. Maybe a little production work was poor in some spots, or a riff was wrong, or pacing a lot of times comes into play. A 9 is pretty much the same thing, but to a bigger degree. But when you're in that 9, 9.5, 10, anything that you find wrong, you're probably nitpicking. You're probably looking a lot deeper than most people would. Once you get lower than that, anything that's, as far as I can, from my perspective, anything lower than a 6 basically means the album is a disposable one, a complete throwaway. I think Brian feels the same way, because I know the reviews that he's done that were in that range have all been albums that he said he'll probably never listen to again. The 6 and 7 range is usually, the album had potential to be really good and something just went wrong in the process. And an 8 is what I think is kind of the line that you want to hit. If you're hitting the 8 mark, that means the album is good, very little wrong with it, maybe it wasn't as strong as it could have been, but you got the idea right. So I think that pretty much breaks down how the ratings really work. And again, you're going to see a lot more good ratings than bad, because it's just kind of the way our love of music tends to go. Not to mention that a lot of the stuff we listen to, I do feel that a lot of the albums that come our way are better than average albums, and maybe we're just lucky, maybe we have our ears to the ground in the right places, but I think most of the stuff that comes to us is worthy of that. So thank you, Angelo. Hope that answered your question. And Jose wants to know what got me into metal. That's a long story, I guess, but I'll cut it down to the 3-minute version here. When I was growing up, my older brother got me into Van Halen, Motley Crue, Poison, stuff like that. That's what he was into. I, on my own, was listening to Weird Al for the most part. But I would say when I got to be 16 or 17, probably, I guess it was 16, I started to get into heavier stuff, but definitely not metal. I was into Seven Dust, bands like that. But I think what really turned the tide for me and got me away from a lot of the stuff I was listening to, a lot of the more radio accessible rock, was, and it sounds silly to say it now, but the first time I heard the band Korn kind of changed my path for music. Now, again, looking back, that sounds silly because, God, they're awful as far as I can tell now. But at the time, that was, a huge departure from what I was listening to. And it kind of got me thinking that maybe it was time to go in that direction. So I started to pick up, heavier stuff, but still nothing that was really, traditionally would have been called metal. We're talking Korn, Deftones, and some of these bands I still listen to today, but those bands started to get me to the heavier side. I would say that it was 2004 when I made the switch, and I was still, in my formative years, but the first time someone played Opeth for me, I kind of went like, whoa, what the fuck was that? And I hated it. It just didn't make sense to me because of what I'd been listening to before. But it was, here's Opeth. And then the second time I was like, okay. And by the third time it was like, okay, well, let me start buying albums. And Opeth, and it was Catatonia after that, Dream Theater soon after that. And I just kind of ran with it. Megadeth came in soon after. I was always a fan of Metallica, but, at this point, Metallica's barely even a metal band. So that was really it. It was 2004, and just, someone playing Opeth for me that really changed the way I listen to music. And I think that what has made me so deeply into metal is the fact that I am somewhat OCD. So when I like a band, I need to know everything that band's ever done. I want to own every album they've ever released. I want to know what bands the guys in the band are in, what bands they've toured with, who they like, and I get myself very, very deep into this. So for someone who's been into metal for 10 years, I feel like I've built kind of a background and a knowledge that far surpasses that, because I'm absolutely dedicated to the music itself, which again is why I think people should buy music. Just imagine if your favorite band said, we can't put out albums because we're not making enough money. That's awful. The thought of that is awful. But I got off topic. So yeah, that was really what got me into metal. That was what changed my life musically. And by no means, I think this is something that people forget. We write, for a metal site, but I don't listen to only metal. Like I said, some of the rock bands that I was listening to, I like the Foo Fighters, Deftones, some of that stuff. I listen to some really bizarre, post-rock kind of stuff. I like classical and jazz a lot. So it's, and I think that being a metal fan, you can like all of those things and they all make sense because they all come from the same foundation. Yeah, I think that answers the question. I think I kept it as short as I could on that one. So thank you, Jose, for that question. I think that's about going to do it for this week. I'm looking at my inbox here. Between Facebook and the email, get a lot of questions, but a lot of them are very similar, and a lot of them have to do with Spotify. A lot of them have to do with the website itself, which I'll probably get into some of those soon, but I found someone who is going to aid in the coding and development of a new website, which is very exciting because we're trying to get sorryweeternal.com officially launched, because we can do a lot more there than we could on a blogspot, though the blogspot site is done as well. But so I'll answer some questions about that stuff next week. Remember, send in your questions to sorryweeternalblog@gmail.com, or you can go on our Facebook page, or you can tweet at us at sorryweeternal. Send us your questions, and I will continue to answer them for as long as you're asking. And based on the amount I have in front of me, I probably have like 5 more weeks worth of stuff. If you guys stopped right now, I would still have plenty. So keep them coming. I like answering your questions, and keep your ears open for a new podcast tomorrow with some reviews from the previous week. And the podcast tomorrow is actually our top 10 albums of the year. Ooh, that's exciting. I guess there'll probably be some questions about that. So guys, thanks for listening. Keep the questions coming, and we will catch you guys very soon.